So this is the car we're working on today, just so that you can see what kind of car it is, compare for yourself. It is a 4-cylinder Toyota Camry. This is a 2003, but it works for any year of the model. Alright, I'm going to try to make this short. So here we go. You're going to need a 10mm socket or wrench, 12mm socket, 14mm socket. You're going to need a decent size 3/8 ratchet because it's going to have to be big enough to be able to take off the serpentine belt as well as crack loose bolts. This is not going to end up being the one I use on here. I'm going to be using a 19mm socket to be able to take off the serpentine belt. You're also going to need an alternator because your alternator is bad, duh. And you're going to need a pry bar or a big old screwdriver, which is essentially a pry bar. I apologize for any audio problems we have. I live next to a pretty busy road now, and that sucks for videos. Alright, now here's your battery. Here's obviously your engine compartment. You're going to want to use a 10mm socket or wrench to be able to take off the negative battery cable on the car so that you can disconnect power so that you don't electrocute yourself while you're working on the car. Now that you've loosened this up, you're going to want to loosen it up all the way. Then you're going to be able to take this off, disconnecting the power. You want to make sure that's out of the way, not grounded on anything, so you might even want to put like maybe a glove around it or something so that it doesn't, end up connecting to anything. There we go, it's out of the way. Now we can move on over here, where we're going to start disconnecting all of these little rubber boots from the electrical, because now we can do that because we disconnected the battery. We're going to expose what we need. Might need a 12 or a 13 for that, we'll double check. You might need a 10mm for that. Good thing we mentioned that earlier. Work smarter, not harder, right? So we're going to try to disconnect whatever we need to disconnect here and not everything, because we only need to pull this electrical enough out of the way to be able to get the alternator out. So we're going to start by removing this bracket right here, 10mm bolt. Let's go, hurry up. Alright, this might be hard to see, but life is hard sometimes, so get over it. But now that we can take this 10mm off, I'm going to put that somewhere safe out of the way. Free over here. We need to get down to this. There it is right there. I don't know if you can see that 19mm bolt right there. That's on the tensioner. That's gonna loosen up the serpentine belt so that we can get it off the alternator pulley. That's really all we care about. So we're gonna right up in there loosen that up with a 19mm. It's gonna come down. This is the way the tensioner wants to go. So righty tighty. You're gonna want to come down with it and then loosen up this right here, the serpentine belt. Just get this off. You don't need to take the whole entire belt off. Look up a diagram beforehand so you don't goof this all up. Again, I recommend professionals do this. I'm being goofy right now, obviously, but don't screw yourself over, okay? Don't be a hero. No one cares if you can do this or not. So take this belt off, and then we'll be able to get started over here. Just slip it off and keep it there. That way, when you put it back on, you can just kind of slip it back on. Keep things easy for yourself. Don't work hard. So I don't know if you can see this here, but we got ourselves hooked up down there. We're going to be prying downwards here. This is obviously going to be slightly in the way of the belt, but we're going to hope that by the time we come down all the way that we can loosen this up and it's not going to be too in the way. So this is obstructing us over here, but I'm going to try to use this wrench on here. So I'm going to have to switch to be able to use both hands. Unfortunately, I can't hold the camera in both at the same time. But you basically pry down, you can see the belt tension goes down. I'm going to have to readjust this and use both hands to be able to get the belt actually off, but you just bring the tension off, slip the belt off. Alright, with the belt off now, and you'll see I just tucked it out of the way there so we can slip it right back on afterwards. We need to take some of this electrical off, remove this. Might take off the sensor, we might not, but over here we definitely have to take off the ones for the alternator. So you kind of just press in there, pull it off. Alright, so we pull this up out of the way so we don't screw anything up. 10mm. Get that on there nice and good. There we go, nice and careful like. Alright, this next connector is right here. It's got the little depression piece on the bottom because they like to hate us. They just make things unfortunately annoying. So you just gotta get in there and pull that off. Alright, so now we got a lot of wiggle room with the wiring harness here. There is another connector that you can disconnect, but it's really hard to get to, so you kind of have to disconnect the alternator first and then disconnect with a pair of pliers this connector here, and then you'll have the alternator fully out. So we're going to go ahead and tackle these bolts This one here is a 14 on the top, and you got, there you go, you got a 12 millimeter on the bottom. Loosen those up. You might need a pry bar. Alright, so I loosened up the one on top, loosened up the one on the bottom. I even pulled the one on the bottom out because I wanted to leave the one on the top a little bit in there because I don't want this alternator to just drop randomly. So I'm going to loosen up the one on top now because it's easier accessible. That's the reason why I left the top one in. So now I'm going to loosen that up, loosen up the alternator, and then, you know, once this is free, we can get this last piece off the harness back over here. Like I said, it's hard to see, but it's right there. So I'm going to carefully pry on the alternator. You can see that the alternator will now move around. So we're going to have to get it out. The bracket's still snagging on it a little bit. So I don't know if you can see it down there, but there is a spot. You should be able to see it. Come on, focus. There we go. It's right in here. You can put a pry bar or a screwdriver right in there, and if you notice, it's right next to where the alternator pinches in. If you get just enough leverage, you can see we're separating it there. The alternator is freeing up. Might even be free now. There you go. So the alternator is free from the engine compartment. We've turned it to its side so that we can get access down here on the, there is access to this bracket here so we can separate it. We can disconnect this bottom connector now a little bit easier if you haven't already, just so we can twist this around a little bit better, get some pliers in there and disconnect it in case you want to do it that way. You can see now with the bottom connector disconnected, we can actually turn this a whole lot, and we'll be able to get a pair of pliers in there and disconnect that. And now the alternator can just come out. We can throw this thing back in there. We don't need that to be exposed right now. Again, pull this wiring back out of the way a bit. And then, geez, it kind of fell slightly. Want to probably grab it from the pulley, let it maybe turn to its side. Go with the, there we go, slip the wiring harness off and just whoop, there you go. There it is. That's where it comes out of. And yeah, you just reverse these steps to put it all back on. Pretty simple. I'll put some torque specifications in the description. Have a good one, yo. So I wouldn't worry about the torque specifications too much, because if you have too powerful of a torque wrench, you might actually overdo it and break something. So I would recommend doing it hand tight, obviously not too tight, but this is just an alternator, so it's not necessarily super crucial. But if you're really curious, the bottom 12 millimeter bolt should be roughly 20 foot-pounds, and the top 14 millimeter bolt should be roughly 38 foot-pounds. Alright, if this video was helpful to you, maybe leave a like and subscribe, and if it wasn't, I'm sorry I suck ass. Alright, you have a nice day. Peace.